And we're back, and boy, you know, I talked about Strangers on a Train, that for me, the wrong man scenario with that film was one of the first ones that I personally was squirming, you know, with Bruno coming after a guy in Strangers on a Train. The other wrongly accused movies maybe a little too far-fetched for me, or I couldn't identify. I really squirmed in Strangers. Well, I really squirmed in this one as well, and I'll bet you did too, because it's just terrifying that this could happen, and sort of made us angry, and we'll talk about that in a bit. You know, this isn't the first time we've seen it. We've seen this a few times, and this one really involved us the first time we saw it. It doesn't necessarily stand up to repeated viewings, however. I think seeing it maybe a second time would be interesting, but we're past that. And one of the reasons is it is completely devoid of humor, and probably because there's nothing funny about being wrongly accused of crimes. And as Diane pointed out, he's really just telling the story. He's not improvising, he's not doing it for entertainment, he's telling you a story. It's very documentary-like. With the exceptions of the part where the camera is spinning when Henry Fonda is in jail, and that's Hitchcockian, and of course the part where Henry Fonda's thinking, and of course the real bad guy comes in and their two faces melt together. That was a little bit of cinema, but other than that, you know, not a lot of Hitchcock traits. You know, so is it the ultimate wrong man movie? It's called The Wrong Man. Well, no. I mean, there's no international spy ring that's at work here. There's no blonde chicks to be rescued by. There's no brandy. Good point. There was no brandy in this one. No funny bits, no romance, and no love story. But a happy ending, and you know, really tacked on probably by the studio, just because audiences love happy endings. And you know, with regards to that, Alfred Hitchcock said with regards to Rose being in the sanatorium, he said later in an interview, she's probably still there. You know, in real life she went home, but not everybody can recover from something like this. So the cameo is very interesting. It's not very often a director comes out and tells you what you're about to see, but like I said, he was doing that every week on that show, and I just wanted to talk about that show a little bit as well. I'm going to link up the Vera Miles episode called Revenge on YouTube, because you can watch it on YouTube, and it's worth seeing now. It's worth seeing it because you've just seen Vera Miles. She really is a beautiful actress, and she, you know, she certainly didn't look beautiful in this one, but he does say that every word is the truth when he comes in front of the wrong man, and that's not true. There were some instances where they stretched the suspense along, where in real life it was resolved, but you know, to create some suspense, the truth was stretched. And you know, be your own judge. You can certainly read the Life magazine, that will link that up as well, and read the book, The True Story of Christopher Emmanuel Balestrero. So boy, you know, and interesting too that the very next year when Henry Fonda stars in 12 Angry Men, probably one of his best known roles, if you've seen it, and during this movie you wanted to stick up for Manny, well, that's exactly what he does in 12 Angry Men, and you know, you better believe that there's a lot of passion behind it, because in this movie no one really stood up for him, and it's worthwhile seeing that 12 Angry Men movie in that context. So, and you know, as far as realism goes, they went to great lengths to film things where they took place. In fact, when Henry Fonda's character, when Manny's being put into prison, they filmed that in City Prison in Queens. And there's a moment actually where Henry Fonda's getting locked up, and you hear all the commotion in the background, the other prisoners. Well, because it was real, one of the prisoners actually shouts out, he says, "What they get you for, Henry?" And that's, if you want to go back and hear that, it's quite audible. You can hear it. It's at 54 minutes and 36 seconds on the DVD we have. "What'd they get you for, Henry?" So that's one of my favorite parts of the movie. So earlier we said that the film was devoid of humor. It is, but boy, there's a part that just cracked us up when we first saw it, and we refer to it all the time. The scene where Manny has taken Rose in to get looked at by the doctor, and then the doctor assesses her, comes out to talk to him, and he's all concerned, and he looks at her, he looks at the doctor and says, you know, what's wrong with Rose, doctor? Is it her mind? And he says, Yes, I'm afraid it is, and we just think that's hilarious. It's a sign of the times. I mean, audiences were still getting used to mental illness. The study of it was probably still in its infancy, but we sure saw that in Spellbound when Gregory Peck was going through that, and really a moment in time when doctors were just coming to terms with the guys that were coming back from World War II. They were shell-shocked. They had post-traumatic stress disorder, and I think Rose certainly was suffering from that. So speaking of World War II, the doctor in that scene, did you notice who that was? That was Werner Klemperer, who of course plays Colonel Klink in those great Hogan's Heroes episodes. Werner Klemperer was a heck of a guy. He was German in real life and a classically trained musician, but he, like a lot of people, like Peter Lorre, had to flee Nazi Germany in 1933 because he was Jewish. And it's worth looking him up. He's a neat guy, and he was great in this. So, and speaking of people you might know, those two little giggly girls at the door when they were researching trying to find the alibis, the witnesses. Those two little girls were Tuesday Weld and Bonnie Franklin. And Bonnie Franklin was the mom in One Day at a Time, and Tuesday Weld is Tuesday Weld. So you've either seen her movies from the 60s, 70s, 80s, and now, or you haven't. So. So there you go. I wonder if the real Manny and Rose found it eerie that this movie was being. I wonder if they went to see it. And you know, I googled their name to see if he was still alive, and I can find nothing about this guy. So I think that's probably a good thing because he didn't really seek out the spotlight, and I imagine they would prefer to be left alone. So. You know, speaking of the real Manny and Rose, Hitchcock actually went to Florida with Henry Fonda and Vera Miles to meet the real Manny and Rose because he wanted them to meet them and maybe to realize how serious this was. Hitchcock actually met with the judge, the real-life judge who was on the case, and the real-life defense attorney, Frank O'Connor, who's a real person, became the government senator or something like that. And they're listed in the opening credits as advisors. So it's very interesting. You know, when we first saw this, we were like you. If this is your first time seeing it, we were just horrified with the lineup and the way he was arrested and the way they did and we were thinking that's not right. And we don't know what the rules are. We watch TV. Fortunately, one of our friends is a real live detective, and we contacted her to get her feedback on this, about what things are like today, and she actually wrote up a little piece on that, and I'm going to link that up below as well. And it's very interesting to see what the procedure is today, what her thoughts are on you know, witnesses, or not witnesses, but
eyewitnesses.
Yeah, on eyewitnesses and how unreliable they are. And boy, we sure saw that. And I think that you know, with Manny, in real life, he wasn't mad. He said everybody was just doing their job. The cops were just doing their job. But I'm pretty sure the one thing he said is that he wishes that the witnesses would have said they were sorry, and a lot of them never did. They said they didn't want to send a innocent man to jail, but they wouldn't change a thing. And boy, that's something. You know, the whole time we're like, where's his Miranda rights? When are they going to tell him he has the right to remain silent? And everything he says is going to be used against him. And how dumb was it for him to write? I mean, if he's the bad guy, why wouldn't he write with the wrong hand or dot his I's with little hearts or something to disguise it? It makes no sense that they would think he's the bad guy. So anyways, please do read that little bit on the way things, up in Canada anyways, where she's a detective up in Calgary. And it's very, very interesting how things are done today. Probably, maybe not perfect, but a lot better than what we saw. And maybe that's the beauty of this movie, you know, because changes have to be made to prevent this sort of thing. And maybe that's the best part of this movie, The Wrong Man. Certainly was something that was close to Alfred Hitchcock, this fear of being falsely accused. And boy, you know, we all know that story of when his father locked him up when he was a little boy just to teach him a lesson for 5 minutes, and how that scared him to death. Well, if you want to know what that looks like, you just saw it. The fear in the eyes of Henry Fonda. It was extremely well done. Boy, was he good. Very subtle, very restrained, very, very good. I don't, you know, he was just perfect. I mean, Henry Fonda basically plays Henry Fonda, but he was sure good in that. You know, that line at the end, do you know what you've done to my wife? I really felt that he felt that way. So, and Vera Miles, not a glamorous role, but boy, in lesser hands, it would have been not good, and she certainly was convincing of someone who was having a breakdown. So, more on Vera Miles next week. That's for sure, and the week after. So, so good. So we are now done with 1956, and whew, that was a lot of stuff. We had 6 movies in 3 years, so that was an awful lot of work for these guys. So, but we did want to talk about what won Best Picture in 1956, and it's a movie called Around the World in 80 Days, starring David Niven and Shirley MacLaine. And if you have 3 hours, it's 3 hours, isn't it? It's pretty good, and It was produced by someone named Michael Todd. There's a million cameos in it. I mean, Frank Sinatra's in it. I can't think of it. Millions of people. We don't even know half of them who they are because we're young. But he actually coined the term cameo. It was a way to get a big name into a movie with a bit part. Marlene Dietrich is in it, exactly. And so all these times Hitchcock's been doing cameos, what did they call it? I guess they didn't call it that because apparently he did coin this phrase in 1956. So The Ten Commandments was also released in 1956 just to put things in context with The Wrong Man. And of course Anne Baxter is the beautiful Nefertiti in The Ten Commandments. Vera Miles stars in The Searchers, the great John Wayne movie this year. And High Society is released, Grace Kelly's final movie. More on Grace Kelly next week. Also, Love Me Tender, Elvis's first movie, was released in 1956. And boy, to show you how long Alfred Hitchcock's been making movies, Elvis was born the same year that Alfred Hitchcock was making The 39 Steps, which for us was movie number 12. So good. Yeah, we're done with 1956, and we are going to move on to 1958. We skip a year, so hopefully everybody gets a good rest, and we'll be on with Vertigo. So we're super excited about that. We're loving the comments, so keep them coming. And so we'll wrap this up from our couch to yours. We'll see you next week.